What's going on, everyone? Alliance Orc here, and welcome back to another video. Throughout World of Warcraft's lifestyle, we've had many people talk about what the hardest fights are on Mythic, what the hardest raid bosses are, hardest dungeon bosses, hardest world content is. But I don't really recall anyone ever making any videos going over what the hardest LFR bosses are. For those who do not know, LFR is a mode designed in World of Warcraft for the player to be able to learn the fights through a queued scenario. It was introduced in Dragon Soul and has existed since then. But not all LFR fights have been created equally. Some have actually been hellholes. People dread these LFR fights, and today we're going to be going over the top 10 hardest LFR boss fights in World of Warcraft. So buckle up, get ready, and let's hop right on into it. And our first entrant in this video is Horadon. Horadon is a difficult boss, or was a difficult boss in LFR, really for the simple aspect of this fight was really long. I'm quite sure Horadon is one of the longest LFR fights in World of Warcraft history, and this fight, you could basically bloodlust on the pool and almost be able to bloodlust at the end where he would be at this door. The issue and what made Horadon difficult, though, were the ads you see up above. The ads would basically be coming out of the gate. You'd have elite ads jumping down, and everyone would be focused on Horadon because he has so much health. But there were also times when the Dinomancers who dropped orbs, the orbs wouldn't be clicked, so the boss would move on to the second door, and the first door would still be pouring out ads. And if that wasn't enough, about like 5 or 6 minutes into the fight, you'd probably be at about the third door by now. The Drakari ads actually had a plague debuff, and if that didn't get dispelled, it was Drakari. Let's see if I can find it real quick for you guys. Deadly Plague. Basically, they'd be putting this deadly plague on people, and if it didn't get dispelled, this plague would drop your party like rocks. And wiping that far into the Horadon fight really just kind of turned a lot of people's brains off for this boss. So future pulls were basically more and more annoying. But, this is just the start of the list. He's at the bottom of the food chain. And I promise you, there are some real nasty fights coming in the later part of this video. And next up in our round of LFR villains, we have Siegecrafter Blackfuse. So anyone who did this guy on Heroic before Mythic was a thing knows how nasty he was on Heroic. But what if I told you on LFR he was equally as evil? So on LFR, there is something called a real lack of communication between players. People wouldn't communicate. And in this fight in particular, not communicating is absolutely vital, because in LFR, you would have people in charge of the conveyor belt. I can't remember how many, I think it's like 1 or 2. But usually when those people died, a lot of times no one would say anything. The way you'd find out is when the boss's whole arsenal of abilities came hitting your face at once. And by then, your healers would be absolutely overwhelmed. Everyone would be running around trying to avoid everything because you've got drills popping up, you got lasers beaming people, you got crawler mines chasing people, you got an ad that needs to be tanked, you got the boss throwing his saw blades. Like, this fight on LFR was insanely chaotic. And the part that makes it so difficult is that the fate of the kill rested entirely on whoever was on the conveyor belt. Because I can tell you right now, on LFR, if your conveyor belt person died, no one else was volunteering to jump on. And if they did, congratulations, you found a rare one. But yeah, LFR Black Fuse was actually a terror. Next up on our list, we have every Alliance player's favorite Frost Mage, and that is Jaina Proudmoore. So for those who do not know, Jaina's LFR story is actually kind of tragic. No one wanted her smoke. So when the Jaina LFR wing opened up, essentially this is how it went down. You would join. If Mecha Turk was still alive, congratulations, you had a Gmod chance. But 99% of the time you joined this wing, and Mecha Turk would be dead, and it would just be a revolving door of people leaving. People would have rather taken the 30-minute deserter buff and try again on their ults for a fresh run than to deal with Jaina Proudmoore. And then Blizzard pulled the rug and said, if you guys want the mount for Mecha Turk, you're going to have to kill Jaina on LFR. And that opened a whole new can of worms, because the issue with Jaina isn't in her phase 1. It is in her phase 2. Remember, this is LFR is designed for people to learn and see the fights. And in Jaina's phase 2, at one point, she will go immune and start slowly uncovering the room in ice. What people didn't know was there was a wall you had to break. So whenever Jaina would start doing her cast, everyone was getting frozen. And in this fight, getting frozen, the only way you were getting unfrozen is if someone broke you out. But no one was doing that because they were too busy trying to find this wall to break down. And majority of the time, melee players weren't paying attention, would get frozen almost instantaneously during the transition. And if you did not break that wall down fast enough, everyone got frozen and everyone died. This fight was truly a nightmare. And like I said, at the end of the day, no one even wanted it. They wanted to just come in here, kill Mecha Turk, and move on. But the issue is that because of how it was handled, no one was able to actually kill Mecha Turk, because every time you'd come into the swing, he'd be dead. So thus, people got to experience Jaina's wrath firsthand, and it was not a pretty sight. I've seen several groups have as many as 6 to 7 stacks of determination on Jaina and still struggle with her phase 2. Alright, and next up on our list is Razageth. So bear with me, LFR Dragonflight is not yet a thing, and you cannot get to Razageth, so bear with me. Also, I don't have any active friends at the moment who can help me get to Razageth, but Razageth takes our next spot on this list because Razageth's fight on LFR was a train wreck. Putting it simple, and everyone wanted a Storm Eater skin. Is the only reason they were doing it. But essentially, the goal for Razageth's fight was she would drop these electrical storm puddles on the ground, and she would do a heavy little flap of her wings. And if you weren't in that storm puddle, you just got sent flying, buddy. So that mechanic, and this mechanic happened, by the way, very early into the fight. So it was very easy to lose half of your raid very early in. That mechanic kills so many people, but then you get to the part where you split the raid up, and Razageth throws another curveball at you. People who aren't actively where they're supposed to be got sent flying. So anyone, essentially, if you're not paying attention in the Razageth fight on Raid Finder, you were essentially killed instantaneously, and it was made very, very apparent because of the fact that so many of these mechanics just basically involve paying attention. But yeah, that's really about it for Razageth. Like I said, I also didn't have too many pull experiences in LFR Razageth, but the ones I did have showed me very early on why she is very much deserving to be on this video. And next up on our list, we have the Jailer. So this one I had to go to the World of Warcraft community for and kind of do some research because I wasn't playing during Sepulchre, and what they told me was actually quite hilarious. And that is because any fight that involves mind control in LFR is an automatic red flag. More on that later. If you know, you know. But the Jailer fight, essentially, you're relying on other people who have probably never even seen a fight, don't know what to do, to jump into these holes to give you coverage from the Jailer's complete and utter mind control abilities. And the way you do that is with bombs, because what else would work better than blowing up your raid or yourself if you do it wrong? So essentially, if you jump in too soon, you would die and your bomb would not blow up and no pillar would pop up. If you jumped in too late, the bomb would blow up and you'd probably not even spawn a pillar. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't play this fight during LFR, but this is like the only boss that fits this criteria that I had to go to the community for. But like I said, any fight that brings mind control into the game, especially when you're relying on someone else to keep you safe from mind control, is never a good time. And like I said, just from what I've heard from people say, this fight was an absolute horror show on LFR. But people really wanted that mace because apparently that mace was busted beyond all words, even the Raid Finder version. But yeah, that is our Jailer boy making his appearance in our video. Coming up next in our amazing journey is the LFR N'Zoth. So remember how I said it's only a few seconds ago for you guys, but like 10 minutes for me, how mind control is practically a red flag in LFR? What if you took that mind control aspect and you gave its dependency to a legendary cloak, where the weaker your legendary cloak is, the more easier it is for you to be mind controlled? Put those factors together and welcome to N'Zoth. This fight was essentially all about managing your sanity, even in LFR, and people who didn't do that got mind controlled. If they were like on an alt who had a rank 1 cape, they got mind controlled very, very quickly. Like you could very easily tell who was on their alt and who was on their main, all based on who got mind controlled and when. And this fight was just an absolute pain in the keister because, like I said, mind control is ruinous on LFR. And this boss, that was basically his major gimmick, is he wanted to turn you against your allies. But aside from that, most of the other things you had to deal with in this fight was just the excess amount of tentacles that were spawning everywhere, making sure your groups for the portal phase actually went into the portal, because if enough people didn't go into the portal, that was basically a wipe in and of itself, because Psychus wouldn't die and everything would go right to hell. But yeah, LFR N'Zoth in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. Also, before we do the cut, I just want to let you guys know, I had to come here on normal because LFR N'Zoth actually does not exist in the game. There is no way to queue up for LFR N'Zoth. The wing does not exist on the Raid Finder NPC in Borealis and Zuldazar. So, just wanted to share that useful little bit of information for you all. But yeah, I'll see you at our next boss. This next boss actually has a very special place in my heart. Because this boss was the first time I had ever seen 10 stacks of determination required to beat a boss. Week 1 of Darumu the Forgotten, I remember it so clearly because of how crazy it was. This boss took my LFR group 14, minimum of 14 pulls to kill this boss. We were well over the limit for determination, and that alone should speak volumes to the terror that Darumu stormed in LFR. And the whole reason he brought this terror upon LFR is very simple. Disintegration Beam. On LFR, especially during the first few weeks of his release, Disintegration Beam turned a 25-man LFR into like a 6-man LFR in a matter of seconds. This ability was so disgusting, and Blizzard literally just left it in, which I find hilarious. And it's not even just that, it's also the light spectrum ability as well. As the light spectrum will basically put the red and blue thing on players, and they're expected to uncover ads during the light spectrum. And if you don't uncover those ads fast enough, then he's just going to do his Disintegration Beam anyways, and if both of those happen together, you could just forget it. This boss was absolutely nightmarish. It's crazy that they actually took the knockback of all things out of LFR, because this boss on higher difficulties has a knockback that he would do as well. But yeah, this boss, like I said, he holds a memorable place in my heart because he's one of the only bosses I've ever had 10 stacks of determination on and still couldn't kill on LFR. This man was that guy, and he continued to be that guy throughout all of Mist of Pandaria. Even at the end, when people were BIS'd out in Siege of Ogmargir, this guy was still taking at least 7 people in an LFR run if he got his disintegration off. So yeah, unlike Mechatork, where you wanted to be at the start, people would be thanking God when they showed up and he was already dead. They'd be like, thank God I don't have to deal with him. This boss instilled terror like no other. And speaking of installing terror, let's just take a look at who our next guy is. I'll give you a hint, he's also Mist of Pandaria themed as well. Next up in our video, we have Garrosh Hellscream. Honorable mention to the trash before Garrosh Hellscream, as even on LFR, that trash was a raid boss of itself. There have been so many times that trash would just run wild through your raid and tear everyone to shreds, all because one of the ads gets this unkillable buff. The blobs are buffing them, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about our former war chief. Garrosh Hellscream, his fight on Raid Finder was a nightmare. First off, if no one took care of the engineers who would spawn here and here, congratulations, you're an Iron Star salad, as those things would roll right through you and slice your raid to ribbons immediately. But let's say you did have someone take care of the Iron Stars and you made it to phase 2. Remember what I mentioned during Jailer and N'Zoth? Yeah, it's back one more time in this video. Mind control. But Garrosh's mind control is different, as when people get mind controlled in the Garrosh fight, all they do is just mind control everyone else. So if you don't take care of that one person who's mind controlled, you now have 2 people that are mind controlled. Those 2 people make 4 people. Those 4 people make 8, and by then it is too late. The mind controls can spiral out of control really, really, really fast. And this boss, I think this boss is the only other boss I've seen get even close to 10 stacks of determination during my time doing LFRs. And majority of it simply came down to people were not doing mind controls, or they got hit by Annihilate in the transition phase, or the Iron Star ran through the group. There were so many things that could make Garrosh a nightmare on LFR. And like I said, that's not even factoring in your group could already be at each other's throats because of the trash before him as well. This boss truly is one of, if not the hardest LFR fights I've probably ever seen. But we still have 2 more bosses to talk about. One of which takes the number 1 spot. The other one I've only put off this long because I don't want to get like a deserter debuff, and it ruined the whole video. And coming in next, we have the Spine of Deathwing, a fight that has truly and utterly stood the test of time. This fight, at the time of me making this video, probably even a year after this video has been made, this fight is still tripping people up. People still struggle with the roll mechanic. And if they struggled with the roll mechanic, even as far out now as this fight has been, imagine what it was like in LFR when this first came out and what it was current content. I can only imagine the number of people who would be sent flying off into the clouds, destined to land in like Feralis or Silithus or wherever you would land. So with that type of a history book record, and the fact that Deathwing still does his role on LFR, there is no reason why this fight should not be included in this video. But we still have one other boss fight that I have been saving for the end, and that is simply because of the deserter mechanic, meaning this fight is something that is currently active in the War Within. Can you figure out what it is? I'll give you a hint. It's something that sucks more than this. Taking our place as the final LFR boss we are going to be talking about in this video, we have Dementius the All-Devouring. Dementius on LFR is hard for his own set of rules and reasons, that being that any player can brainlessly start the fight without even realizing it. By a simple click of a portal, you literally kill your entire group, as even after Blizzard nerfed the portal to have everyone get pulled in, someone face pulling Dementius will almost certainly always result in an auto wipe, as he does devour so soon after being pulled, even on LFR, that mechanic can literally just gobble you up immediately. And remember, for determination, you have to last for 2 minutes. And that's not even counting the flying phase you have in phase 2, where people get knocked off the platform, or when they get devoured in phase 3, you know. I mean, phase 3 honestly is kind of a gimme, but for the most part, majority of your deaths for Dementius happen in phase 1, and it's majority of the time because someone wants to click the portal. And as you can see, we have a Ret Pally who just face pulled. So we're probably going to give you a little example before we head out. As tank, I do not need to give a hoot about the ads. So let's see. Oh my god. Gobble, gobble, gobble. How many get eaten? Oh my lord. It doesn't even matter that someone else took that tank debuff. We lost like 15 people because that Ret Pally charged in before anyone else. So yeah, with that being said, we're gonna wrap this video up because I've got over an hour and a half of work to do for this video, and I will see you guys in the next video. I hope you have a great rest of your day.